Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Burlington and Beyond. We're celebrating tonight our 99th show. In 2 weeks, we are hoping to have our 100th show. We hope that you'll join us for that as well, as will be a roundtable of most of the members who have been on this panel. And we'll just be sharing our opinions, our feelings, and a little bit about what we've gone over in the show. Tonight, we thought we would get into the question that's on our ballot this next Saturday, and that's if the treasurer should be appointed by the selectmen, or should we, the people, continue to select or nominate or elect a treasurer. We have with us Sally Willard, a former town moderator. Thank you for being here, Sally.
Thank you, Larry. It's a pleasure.
And my other assistant host is Joan Kennedy. Joan, welcome back. It's been a while since I've seen you here.
Hi, yes, thanks, Larry. It's good to be here.
Great. Sally, I was wondering if you could just bring us up to date. We remember when you were moderator, town moderator, and so what's been happening since then with you? What other committees have you been on or working in some sort of capacity?
Thanks, Larry. As you know, I was moderator for 2 years. I was not reelected. I took a year off, and then I was reelected to town meeting. Between that time and during that year, however, the Board of Selectmen had a committee. They formed a committee called the Government Review Committee. And that committee was formed to look at efficiencies that the town could undertake, ways to improve operations, because we have grown over the years and no one's really looked at what we've done. So the Government Review Committee was formed. There were 9 members, including 2 selectmen, a couple of town meeting members. I was selected not as a town meeting member, but it was an interesting committee. We interviewed a lot of the managers at different departments in the town, from the town clerk, the assessor, the police chief, the fire chief, COA, and the treasurer, among others. So it was interesting.
What, again, was the purpose of this committee? Government Reform Committee?
No, the Government Review.
Review, good.
Some people thought that it was formed for the purpose of making Burlington a city.
With the mayor and all that.
Right. I think...
I must admit, I think I heard that rumor too.
Yeah, I heard that rumor.
And I possibly believed it.
Well, that's what some people thought. The idea was really to...
But you deny any association with that movement.
She will neither confirm nor deny.
I was not one of the people who wanted to bring this forth.
Okay.
But
that was
I'm a firm believer in town meeting. I think that town meeting is the greatest form of representative democracy that we have. It gives us an opportunity on a local level to participate, and that's what's so lacking everywhere. But
No, Sal, I agree with that. It's a wonderful form of government.
Yes, yes. But what we were charged to do was just to kind of take a preliminary look into how the town operates, how things get done. One of the things that we did was we brought in someone from the Division of Local Services from the state. And they have a lot of experience working with towns at helping them to improve efficiency, whether it's to help them to streamline operations or to help them change different aspects of their government. But
so the Division of Local Services sort of was like a policy and procedure review for the town.
Right. So
second set of eyes.
They came in and talked to us. The selectmen have subsequently brought them in to do a thorough review, because our committee, although we might have done that, when you have 9 people who are most of whom work someplace during the day, it's awfully hard to get all those people to go out and do a thorough analysis of what's going on in different departments.
Right.
So, and that's why DLS is out there, and that's what they do.
Right.
So
Town
they've-
by town, and city by city. Well, yeah.
Yes, when asked.
Okay.
So the selectmen have brought them in. I understand that they were doing some interviews of different departments last week, but I'm not up to date on exactly what they're doing. The Government Review Committee submitted a report to the Board of Selectmen saying that, you know, we thought this committee should go on, and that we should bring in the DLS to do some analysis. And that committee, I think, is still in the works. I don't think they've put anyone on it yet. But I think we can expect to hear more in the future. And despite what some of my friends will say, I don't think that it's a city committee.
It's okay. It's a de facto city committee.
Right,
So the
it is
report
not.
the report that your group created, the government review report that was given to the Board of Selectmen, is that a public document or?
Oh, I believe it is. It
Okay.
should be.
Okay, should be. Yeah, that would be my thinking too. But okay.
So one of the things that came out of that is what has brought us to to our ballot question, and that is on April 30th last year, our treasurer collector Brian Curtin came to tell us all about the treasurer collector's office. And he announced, I think he had done it previously, but he announced that he was retiring. That, in turn, caused the Board of Selectmen to say, well, gee, we're no longer a small town. We have a $150 million a year budget. We have a lot of bonding that is done and that will be done as we upgrade buildings. We should consider doing what more than 80% of cities and towns have done, and that is appoint the treasurer. So in other words, you're hiring someone for the job. Once they started that going, they talked to town council, they submitted a warrant to town meeting. They voted and submitted a warrant article to town meeting, and town meeting voted overwhelmingly in favor of putting this on the ballot. And the people who stood up, except for I think two, everyone who stood up to speak about the question was in favor of the appointment. Just because the town, when the current treasurer was hired, the town had a $20 million budget.
When he was elected.
Right, when he was elected.
First elected.
First elected. The town had a $20 million budget. He's been in office for 42 years, and he's going to retire sometime. So the town had to, it was time to make some kind of decision, and the selectmen chose to put this on the ballot. And that's where we are now.
And so this was a proposal that you personally had favored. You want to see this ballot question go through?
Well, I think it's time. The only requirement today to be elected as the treasurer is that you are 18 years old and a resident of Burlington. Now, if you had a company with a $150 million budget, and you had all sorts of bonds, and you were responsible for the payroll and for benefits and for everything else that helps to keep us running financially, Would you want to just hire someone in off the street who didn't have the experience needed? So what's being proposed is a change. Change is tough, but the selectmen, who most of whom believe that this is a really good thing, there's a process. We've hired managers in the past. There are currently no job requirements, so they would come up with the appropriate requirements based on what other towns have done and what our particular needs are. Some people have said, well, they should have at least 5 years municipal experience, because wouldn't that be good if you had someone who had 5 years municipal treasury experience? I mean,
Well, and an argument could certainly be made for Brian Curtin for the 42 years that he's been functioning as town treasurer, that he's acquired municipal experience. And then the question becomes is it better to have someone that we know will have an accounting background and also perhaps a master's in public administration, and the requisite, as you mentioned, what you think the Board of Selectmen are interested in, which is someone with 5 years of municipal experience, and hopefully very adept at the munis system, which is pretty much what all government agents, what all cities and towns use in terms of reconciling their books.
and that's a good point, because we, without having a set of requirements, and you can't say, oh, to be elected for this job, you need to have you need to meet this requirement. But there are certifications that the treasurer has to go through.
Right.
And if that takes 2 or 3 years for someone to get those certifications, well, that's a real lag.
Now, in terms of the Board of Selectmen thinking to create a job description essentially for the candidate that they would like to have if the position is appointed, are they going to be reaching out to the Division of Local Services? Since they seem to be like subject matter experts as to what towns might want to do to run more efficiently and productively, they would probably have a good sense of what would be the requirement for a treasurer, since you said more than 80% of cities and towns appoint the treasurer.
They could be one source, but just looking at some of the other towns that have recently hired their treasurer collectors, Stoneham is either in the process or they've just hired someone. A year ago, Arlington voted in favor of hiring or appointing their treasurer collector.
Do we happen to know what their budgets are? What about Woburn? That's a city, but...
Yes, and I'm sorry, I had that piece of paper, but I didn't want...
Did your dog eat it? Which one? Never mind. I'm sorry.
But yes, but their
Okay.
budgets are, within the range. Ours is 150 million.
It's robust, but yes. But we're
Yes,
also
I think Arlington is 140 or 130 or 140 million.
Shouting distance of us then, yeah, okay.
That's right.
Well,
and
that reside in
they're
Burlington.
in that case, their treasurer collector retired, and no one stepped up until to run.
That's frightening.
Until
I mean, everybody that works in the town, you have the right to want your paycheck signed. I mean, I don't begrudge anyone a living,
If nobody runs, then the selectmen do appoint.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm
okay.
not sure that that's how state law works, but what happened was this fellow Dean Carmen
Okay.
said, oh, no one's taking out papers, I'll do it. And he ran with the sole purpose that when his mission was to change the position to an appointed position from an elected position.
Okay.
The retiring treasurer was not in favor of appointing, but his predecessor, who had been there for 32 years, was in favor of having an appointed treasurer. So I think it's that municipal finance has become, it's changed. It's become more complex.
Of course.
And communities just want to make sure that they're doing the right things. You know, Burlington's an attractive place to work. And it certainly, you know, if someone's working in a town that has a $100 million budget, this could certainly be a step up. And, you know, what's not to like about Burlington?
It's wonderful. Burlington's a wonderful community. A lot of good and active citizens.
Well, let's take a moment to look at the other side as to why not, why we shouldn't do this. Could we? Would you mind? We've had a successful election of the treasurer for quite a few years now. How many years was that? Over 30?
42.
42.
Wow.
He
That's right.
hasn't been opposed since 1985 because, you know, people don't run, nobody runs against incumbents.
Well, see, that's the thing. A lot of people are very hesitant to run for elected office, and I understand why, having lost an elected office here in the town myself, to a wonderful Sergeant Detective Jim Tigges, who's on the Board of Selectmen as we speak, doing, I'm sure, you know, a wonderful job. He's doing a wonderful job. But again, a lot of people will not throw in their hat because an election is you have to put yourself out in public, you have to lay out a certain amount of money, you have to marshal people to hold signs for you, you have to door knock. It's an arduous process. Larry, you ran for school committee.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly a
Same
bowl
results
of
as you had.
cherries. So
Well-
consequently, you know, I mean, and I don't know what you say as a treasurer any more than, that's why I don't like district attorneys running for office sometimes. I think the law enforcement aspect, you know, what are you going to say? I'm going to lock up everybody? Or I'm going to, you know, give immunity to certain individuals. There's certain positions I'm not keen on as elected offices. And, you know, it's an open question whether or not treasurer should be one of those.
Well, as Phil Gallagher has said several times on TV in different forums, according to Amy Warfield, there are more than 900 people in town who have financial backgrounds. That would include me. I was a financial analyst. I was the controller for an angel-funded startup. I have an MBA.
Okay.
And so, wouldn't I be qualified to run? Sure. There are a lot of people. I was chair of the Capital Budget Committee. But we should have some requirements for this, simply because of the complexity and because of the type of work that the treasurer collector does. And when all of those people who might qualify, they could all run. But what do you have? You have campaign expense, you have the time and the effort, and you have all the stuff that goes into a campaign. It costs a lot of money. I mean, some people spend more than others.
I think we all three know.
But it costs a lot of money, and it takes a lot of time. You know, Phil often says, well, it's just 8 weeks of being approached and interviewed and questioned by the townspeople. But it's not. You don't spend 8 weeks, you know, knocking on doors, especially if you have a job. If you have a job in finance, it's not likely you're going to do that. So all of the people who are qualified, I mean, they should, especially if they have municipal experience, they can submit their resumes. Now, it's not just the Board of Selectmen who will be involved. The town has used the Collins Center of Northeastern over the years.
What is the Collins Center of Northeastern? Other
They
than a pretty building on that campus. Tell us, because I don't know.
They work with their municipal government focused.
Okay.
They act as an agency for cities and towns who want to hire management. So that's one of the things they do.
Okay.
They also do studies. But we would engage someone like that, or a group within the Mass Municipal Association, or another municipal
There's a few other stakeholders, Division of Local Services. There's a few overlapping agencies that you can, or entities that you can turn to assist in this endeavor.
That's right.
Arguably. Okay.
And they would do the first level of interviews. recruiting, helping make sure that all the necessary background checks are done, because that takes time.
Right.
So they would do the initial recruiting, help make sure that we have a solid job requirement
Right.
set up. And then the second level, once those people are found, there would be a second, the next level would be a town committee, ideally composed of the town administrator, the town accountant, the HR, head of HR,
Right.
couple of selectmen. And I think we should have independent members of the community, because you get different questions
Right.
from people out at large in the community.
Right. Just private citizens,
and
perhaps.
so I'm prepared to go to a lot of selectmen's meetings to make sure that that happens, because I think it's important.
Because everyone you mentioned so far is appointed by the selectmen, or they're the selectmen themselves. So I don't
Right.
think you'd get the independence with that type of committee that you just mentioned. So I guess that'd be another concern.
That's a very good point, and that's to Phil's point that he says this is a power grab. I think that there is some concentration of power that it looks like it, but I think that by having an independent agency do the first level of hiring, I think that's a real plus. And I think that having independent members of the community, and it doesn't have to be more than 2 or 3, but people who are not the selectmen, and maybe
I think it'd be important, if we're to go that route, that we have an independent board,
right,
not appointed by the selectmen.
right. That's hard to do, because someone has to appoint them.
Probably like a moderator, somebody independent of the selectmen should be doing that.
Or maybe
Just a thought.
that's an idea.
That's if I favored the proposal. I think there is a danger of it being a power grab, and also there's the danger that, who's going to say that the selectmen will select the most qualified individual? There's no guarantee with that.
Here's the thing, though. Sunshine is kind
They
of
will, if I just finish,
certainly.
the selectmen will pick somebody who's going to carry out their policies that they already have, or help, or at least not fight, that would be more of assistance to them. Of course they would. That's their job. So to keep it a little bit more independent, I think, would be important. I think you just might find better qualified people, and the whole town screening these candidates, I think, is going to be better than just the selectmen, who doesn't have to take the recommendations of this other board. They could still come up with their own candidate. And are these other committees advisory committees only, or do they have some teeth? They can say, no, these are the candidates here that you are to choose from.
I think that that's an excellent question, and my understanding is that the first level would put forth the independent agency is the one that's going to come up with the candidates, who will ultimately, from among those, the last 3 would be the ones that the selectmen would choose from.
Would have to choose from?
Yes.
Well, there's
These are
precedent.
the only people that you can choose from. Okay.
Right.
There's precedent for that being done, because basically when the Board of Selectmen were considering whether or not to reappoint town council for the town of Burlington, what they did was they took, they looked at what they wanted in terms of legal representation for them and for the town, and then they made their criteria. And they had the current law firm that they had been utilizing, and 2 other law firms were the candidates. And they basically had that as a public forum. The Board of Selectmen were, in session, and basically each of the candidates made their presentation with regard to town council. And it was very available and fully vetted. It's a public meeting, and for those people that could not attend the public meeting, it was also on television. I recall, because I was sitting there taking notes, I was kind of intrigued as to what they would look for, the Board of Selectmen, with regard to town council, because you always want to be, from a lawyer's perspective, you also want to make sure that your liability is being taken care of appropriately by the people that you hire as your counsel. So there is some vetting that's done, and to the extent that it's, broadcast here on BCAT, people could look at it, again, in due course, more appropriate for their schedule if they can't make a 4:30 meeting or a 6 p.m. meeting on a Monday night because they can't get home on time. So it does allow for some play with the public's input, because I'm sure as people watch the candidates, they can turn around and contact the Board of Selectmen or the other members on the steering committee, for want of a better phrase, and say, listen, I think this person is a better candidate for these reasons. To have the whole town participate, though, that just seems kind of sausage making, and I don't know how that would work.
But that is an election.
Right. That is.
Right. That is that's what an election is. One of the points that has been made by, and I think it was I think it was Dean Carmen in Arlington, or it could have been the fellow too before him, was that the town accountant, the treasurer collector, is only accountable once every 3 years at election time. You may say, oh, they're accountable to the voters, but that's only every 3 years.
Right.
Whereas a hired treasurer collector is accountable to his boss, in this case the selectman, every day. And you're right, if they wanted to be pulling strings or forcing him to do, that could happen. But it's up to us as voters to make sure that we have a good Board of Selectmen. It doesn't always happen. But it's up
I'm
to
not
us.
going to cry.
It's up to us as the residents of the town and as voters to make sure that we go to the polls and that we elect people who are going to work for us and who aren't going to be up to, just exerting their power.
I can understand what you were saying. I think also, though, they don't necessarily report to the selectmen because I think the accountant would be far and above, way above the minds of the selectmen. It's a very, very background, but I don't think they're going to know what an accountant does as far as the numbers.
Or the treasurer collector.
Okay, right, good. And at the same time, though, they do get audited yearly, and if things appear not correct, again, that person can go to jail.
Well,
They're accountable to the state, to a lot of other agencies, that they have to manage money correctly. Or there could be some very serious liabilities, not for the town, but for the accountant, for the treasurer.
Larry, that's an excellent point. But for something like 7 years, there was an audit remark, a comment that some item, I think it was vacation accruals, had not been properly tracked and reconciled. For 7 years, it was on the audit letter, and it took time. But who was looking at that?
Yeah, it's kind of hard to get excited about vacation time.
It's
you know, 'cause-
it's not just
But,
vacation time.
But
though.
another recent example was I think the payroll taxes hadn't been reconciled. Now these aren't great big bucks.
Well, and also
But-
the trust fund ledgers. I mean, there was an article yesterday in the Burlington Patch, and it was with regard to some unresolved problems. Basically, on a yearly basis, the town auditor, bless their souls, at Powers and Sullivan, and again, they do due diligence, and at the end of the fiscal year, on June 30th of every year, they write a management letter to the town to say, this is what's gone well, and this is what needs improvement or needs attention. And from June 30th of 2016, the management letter that Powers and Sullivan gave to the Board of Selectmen and to the town was about unused sick time. Now, at first blush, you think it doesn't matter, sick time and vacation time accrued. But the problem is these were being kept basically like an old-fashioned classroom ledger, where like yes in attendance, no in attendance. It's being kept by hand. This should be done on an automated payroll system. It's important because we have multiple unions in this town, union employees that, they need to know what time they have on the books, and it needs to be tracked appropriately. Another thing in the 2016 letter from the auditor was, I got to take off my glasses because I need bifocals, was with regard to payroll withdrawals, that there were inaccurate payroll, and that affects also the town's free cash. And this is not me just making it up. This is the management letter by Powers and Sullivan. You can find it at the town clerk in the documents section. There's several years of these. You can look back in 2016, 2017. I mean, for years and years, the town wouldn't switch to Munis, and that's just odd.
Well, but it takes time to make change. Change is never
It's never easy in government. It's going to be at a glacial sort of a pace, and we all get that. I work for a state agency. I understand change takes time, but
Let's ask this question too. If the treasurer was appointed, would any of those issues have gone away?
it depends on the treasurer collector, and
if the audit report was bad enough, the town could turn around and fire that individual. Nobody has a right to gainful employment. I mean,
Do you think there
There's
would
no
have been a
guarantee.
firing based on those reports?
there again, it would depend on the collective wisdom of the town administrator, everyone who was on the audit committee, and the selectmen. And would the selectmen have the necessary, would they have what it takes to fire someone that they had hired?
or reappoint, because obviously
to
the Board of
reappoint.
Selectmen most recently did switch town council, so they will, take it upon themselves to look at things with new, fresh eyes, vet the individual, often publicly in their meetings, and then make a decision. So
Right.
there is some attention and some eyes on it.
But they have also, as someone has said recently, they fired the law firm that they hired a year ago. So
Yeah. They can be a little whimsical then in that regard as well. That's something that is something else to consider.
I think it's a valid question, and they're valid concerns. But I also think that it's up to us. We rotate through the selectmen. They aren't all elected at one time. And it's up to us to pay attention and to vote for and try and encourage people to run who, one, stand a good chance of competing against an incumbent, because, of course, incumbents just keep on keeping on. But I think it really is important for us as citizens to pay attention. And if someone's, for lack of a better word, a slacker as a selectman, then maybe it's time for someone else to run against them. But there again, it comes back to the ballot. But at least there are other people who are involved, and because once the treasurer is elected, unless they're taken out for some terrible deed,
Right.
then we don't really we don't have any options for 3 years. And once they're elected, chances are no one's going to run against them.
Well, I mean, I think you mentioned since 1995,
85.
1985.
Yeah.
Mr. Curtin's been unopposed, and that's quite a long duration. Also, a lot of people maybe do not know what the position entails, and if nothing else, the creation of a job description with input from the different entities that you listed, the Collins Group and the Division of Local Services and the Municipal
Mass Municipal
Mass
Association.
Municipal Association.
And there are others.
If those entities like basically helped the Board of Selectmen and maybe a subcommittee or whatever create what would be the job description, then maybe some of the 900 people that are in town might want to consider taking the position. Another better argument could be made that sometimes it's better to have someone that lives in the Commonwealth but that's out of town because they're looking at things with more objective eyes. I know John Petrin didn't live in town.
But he
Our
worked
town manager, our former
right,
town
right.
manager.
He worked in Ashland before he was
Prior
hired.
to that, right. And then also Paul Sagarino doesn't live in town either, so we could.
Our police chief.
Right, a lot of
came from Amherst.
Yeah,
So
across the
so
Commonwealth, way west. He came east.
So it's not unusual to find interested people who are interested and qualified. Someone who can hit the ground running, because at this point in the town's financial history, I think it's important. The current treasurer-collector manages the collections. Then there's the Treasury Department.
Right. Also,
Benefits. Benefits are all go through the treasurer's office.
Right.
So it's a good time to consider this, and the fact that over the last 20 years, so many cities and towns have chosen to go the appointment route. I think that's very compelling. And right now, 81%, over 81%. So we're in definitely the 19% minority.
Has the treasurer indicated why he changed his mind on retirement? I mean, some people, hey, you'd like to go on in your position. That's wonderful. I mean, in that sense.
That I don't know, but
Okay.
at some point, he's going to want to retire.
Right.
And
So
that's,
the
I mean,
issue-
that's really what it comes down to. At some
Right.
point, he's going to want to retire.
Right.
And then we would go through this again. Because if he retired midstream, so say after a year or so, we have to have a special election. And
That would highlight the position. I'll bet you got a lot of good candidates at that point.
hey, I could run. Just kidding out there, just kidding.
Okay, so the
Well.
what we call the legal standard is capable of repetition but evading review. So at some point we have to look at this issue one way or another. So voters could either, address it. Well, voters will definitely be addressing it one way or another.
That's right.
And now let's all make a pitch to everybody. Yay or nay, please come out and vote. This
Right,
is your
and-
government. You get the government you deserve. So the simplest way to participate is to go out and vote. Try to educate yourself on the matter and then let the voters
And if you want to know
Decide.
more about this issue, the Yes to Appoint committee has a website. It's yes2appoint.com. And we have a Facebook page. YES, the number 2, appoint.
Okay.
And that's all the social media we're doing because we have lives.
well, fair enough. Fair enough.
Well, again, I hope people give it a try as far as another election. Let's see what we get. And it could be that these other towns did have power grabs. I feel that the Board of Selectmen already have enough power and appointment power where they can pretty much control everything. So just having an independent treasurer, I think, was important for the town. And if it has to be appointed, then I prefer at least, if we do go with the appoint decision, then there should be an independent body that not appointed by the selectmen. Not the selectmen, not appointed by the selectmen that reviews these. Let's
Well-
just say town moderator could appoint people to review that position. That's what I'd like to see happen. I wouldn't want to have politics enter into it. And once you have the nomination by the selectmen, you can't help but have some of that. They're all going to have their preferences.
Right. Well, when he came before the government review committee,
When who?
Brian
Okay.
came before, he said he is in favor of election, but if appointed, then the appointment should be by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
The alternative would be to be appointed by the town administrator.
Which is also appointed by the selectmen, so
Right.
you wouldn't get
Well,
much independence there.
Right.
So I think
But-
Larry's point is well taken. All roads lead to Rome. So the Board of Selectmen at some point have their hand on the scale, and the only question is how heavy-handed they might be. Is that
For each candidate.
Is that
Right.
where you're?
Well, and
I'd say there's no escaping it. You're gonna no avoiding it. That's what's gonna happen.
But I mean, the Board of Selectmen collectively function like the equivalent of a mayor would be in the city of Woburn. So six of
Well-
one, half dozen at the other. At some point, somebody's going to be leading the town,
The state still elects its treasurer,
right?
not appointed, but elected by
Right.
people. It seemed to work there, so I think it could work here in Burlington. Now again, if we don't attract anybody, now that could be a different thing, and it could be a case. And again, the selectmen do appoint when nobody does run. When there's an open position, selectmen do have the right to appoint.
but if the position is vacated during the term, you have to have a special election. Right. It's one
So
of
any eager 18-year-old looking for gainful employment
Well,
could, in
it-
theory, put his or her
it-
name down and
it-
run for elected office
in theory.
to run a $150 million
But-
budget.
But all of the people who would run could save themselves the time, the energy, and the money by applying for the position. You know, it all comes down to what are the job requirements. And if the job requirements are fairly specific, a minimum level of accomplishment in municipal government, then I think that we stand a really good chance of getting some really good candidates. And it's up to the people to pay attention. You know, I know, time is short, but we really we need to pay attention to what's going on. And all of the meetings.
I don't think you'll have any disagreement there.
All of the meetings should be public, or there should be some information that comes out of them. You know, especially if it's a
that's true.
townwide committee. I mean, that should all be.
Well, the
should-
perfect thing, if it's a public meeting, it's a public hearing, it's noted ahead of time so people can attend physically, or they can watch from home on BCAT, which is wonderful. It's a wonderful resource for people to keep abreast of government issues, perhaps while they're home making dinner or folding laundry. I mean, because as you've noted, we all do have lives, and that's wonderful. That makes us more robust citizens. Concerning the question as to whether the state treasurer strike the town treasurer, whether or not the person is appointed or elected, they're still responsible. I want to get back to this a little bit because there was some discussion earlier about, well, the person who's elected is more responsive to the voters because if they do anything improper, they could be criminally prosecuted. Any city, town, municipal, or state employee who acts outside the scope of his or her job or does anything that's illegal or quasi-illegal, at a minimum is going to be subject to a state ethics commission inquiry. Now, for those of us in state government who look at the state ethics commission, we sometimes look at them as with less teeth, but there's also the Inspector General's office, there's the District Attorney's office, there's the U.S. Attorney's office. There's a lot of watchdog organizations that look over state, county, and municipal employees who act outside the scope of their employment. And, with obviously grave repercussions. I'm thinking of Andy Dukian with the crime lab issue, where, she ended up getting a prison sentence for what she did. She lied in court numerous times and committed perjury numerous times and altered criminal, drug test results and wrecked the lives of many, criminal defendants and caused the state untold harm. So there's ways for any state, county, municipal employee to be brought to to answer for his or her offenses if they do something improper. So I don't think elected or appointed is really going to be that much of a concern there. And I just want to
Because
caution
there's plenty
also.
of oversight already.
What?
Because there's plenty of oversight already,
Well-
is what you're saying.
But
Right.
there should be certain oversight, and it's one of those things.
But-
Again, as citizens in the Commonwealth, you can bring questions that you have to the State Ethics Committee, the State Ethics
But-
Commission, and other entities that I've just
But
listed.
people don't know what's going on in the office. And the only report that we ever have, the only public report that we ever have from the treasurer collector is in the town's annual report. It's not like he goes on television to talk about how he makes decisions, what he's doing, what he's doing to look at the future. What if there's a recession? What if we lose a lot of these restaurants? What if something happens and our bubble bursts? Then what are we going to be doing financially? And what's the impact on our bonding and our AAA rating? So, but because
I think that's going to be more than just treasurer getting involved in those types of questions, though.
The treasurer
think
is
everyone in
quite
government
involved
be
in the bonding rating, and I know when we were both on Ways and Means, Larry, we'd get a presentation done by Treasurer Collector Brian Curtin with regard to the bonding of the town and what was going to go out for bonding and things like that. But again, I referenced the reports that are the management letters from Powers and Sullivan with regard to some questions with regard to the some of the accounting practices that were not quite state of the art, and perhaps in that sense, an appointed individual will have more practice and experience with the Munis system, which is what's used by cities and towns to balance their budgets.
and
It's
maybe
good
that's-
software. It's a good system.
But maybe that's something that as we go forward, when the ballot measure passes.
Well, hopefully
Larry,
not.
you when the ballot measure passes, you can join me in public time, citizens' time, at the Board of Selectmen, and we can lobby for independence and for inclusion of people who are not part of the club.
Well, as I see it, when this measure fails, I'll be glad to sign your papers to run for treasurer. Glad to look at your resume. Is that a deal?
That's a deal.
Okay.
Wow! Now there you have it. We've given you some late-breaking news, whether or not the ballot question passes. But again, I would urge everybody, yay or nay, no matter how you feel about it, please go out and vote. And then that way, even if you don't, if the ballot question doesn't go the way that you voted, at least you have the right to gripe about it, whether you're at, True North Coffee Shop or Dunkin' Donuts or whatever. You'll have the right to gripe with your neighbors and friends about the fact that the ballot question didn't go your particular way. But if you don't participate, zip it. Zip your lips. We don't want to hear from you.
Right. The election is on Saturday.
This Saturday, yeah.
This Saturday, April
Very
6th, at Burlington High School from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. And it's whoop. Oh, someone forgot to.
I didn't.
From 8 a.m. to 8 p.m. There are a couple of contested races. The Board of Selectmen, there are 3 candidates running for 2 seats. The Planning Board, there are 2 candidates running for 1 seat. The treasurer position is up, and no one's challenging. The 2 candidates running for 2 seats on the school committee, but there are lots of town meeting races. There are some write-ins. I don't know if I'm allowed to say who I know who's running a write-in campaign, but there are some write-in campaigns going on.
And what precincts?
Precinct 5, I know for sure. There is a write-in.
Maybe precinct 1 also has a
And-
write-in.
And precinct 1, okay.
And then it'll be up to the candidates to contact those precinct members.
Right, right. So Yes, and it's running for office, even as a town meeting member, is not always easy. I know that when I ran, the hardest thing that I ever did was pick up the phone and start calling people. And I didn't use any robocalls, but every now and then I'd get someone saying, "Oh, robocall," and then hang up.
Like, no,
Because
it's
I had,
me.
because
I'm a flesh
I had
and blood woman.
I had my pitch down, but it's important.
Yeah.
You know, we have it in New England. We have this wonderful form of government that involves town meeting, and it's our local legislature.
It
Town
is.
meeting makes all the decisions. You both know, you were on.
Right,
Makes all the decisions about how we're going to spend money. If there are changes to the general bylaws or to zoning, all that comes before town meeting and for a vote. And we have 126 representatives in 7 precincts. They would, I'd say they'd love to hear from their constituents.
They would.
But give them a call. Send them an email. You can find the list with their contact info on the town website.
The town clerk's office has the website specifically, right?
Right. And well, it's under, if you go to burlington.org, you click on town government, and then down in the lower right-hand corner from a big screen, you'll see town meeting. But it's well worth. And it's worth, if you've never watched town meeting, it's worth watching because you learn.
Well, that's true. And being a member, you especially learn what's going on, where before you had no clue what was happening.
Right.
So I'd encourage anybody who's partly interested to look into running. It's only getting 12 signatures. That's easy. Just 12 signatures, and you could be in town meeting. Sal, I wanted to ask you about any other issues that might be coming up in Burlington that looks like they could be hot issues after this election, where we're going to turn down.
No.
I
The
love
people
the
are
spirit of debate amongst the two of you. That's delightful. That alone
the
is-
people are going to vote.
And just for the
vote
record,
yes.
Joan, you're neutral on this.
I am neutral on this. I am a resident of the town of Reading, so I am very neutral.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Yes.
I think probably one of the biggest issues that we face annually is our budget and what are we getting our money's worth. Some people would say yes, some no. I think all in all, we're doing fine. But I think that the biggest issue that people have in town is the traffic. It's hard to come up with something, come up with a way to get beyond the traffic jams. I, for one, was so delighted when Wegmans opened because I'm over in the corner of town that to get anywhere, I had to go through traffic. And that has minimal traffic to get there. But, I think traffic has always been an issue. I think our facilities are an issue because we have a lot of aging facilities. There are schools that will require upgrading simply because they've been open for a long time. They have physical issues and all of that.
I think a lot of the buildings, so we are taking on a little bit each year. So I don't see any big crisis coming there. But just ongoing maintenance, repair of roofs, windows, and things that need replacement. But otherwise, I don't see a real issue or crisis in that respect.
I heard recently, and it may have been at the COA, COA function.
Which is the Council on Aging,
Council
just
on Aging,
for clarification, because
right.
not everybody's going to be familiar
Right,
with
the Council on Aging forum that the candidates were at. That there are 3 schools that are being considered. They need significant renovations. Some people say that this building, the high school where BCAT is, is in need of some significant
the boiler is.
investment.
I was on the school department subcommittee budget for Ways and Means
So-
back in the day, and I know the boiler is a problem.
So I think there's a lot, there's a lot. We have a lot of good committees. Sometimes stuff flares up and causes great consternation, but we have a lot of people who are a lot of citizens who are interested, who go to meetings, who speak up, and I think that if we could get more people to do that, it would be awesome.
Okay. So nothing real big, no real, it's just ongoing replacement, buildings, costs, etc. No
That's
new
right.
projects. I think the biggest project would be the water project, hooking up to MWRA.
Right.
And the fact that we were running out of water here, that was a little scary. But I guess that's under, that's under agreements now, and I even think bonding too, right?
Right.
Yep.
Right. It's all part of it. It's, and everything that you do costs. So
Yeah,
it's important to have
Don't say
good
it.
and qualified
Don't tell me it has to be
managers.
selected by the selectmen.
Or good and qualified
Good
elected
and-
individuals that,
right.
that will,
Right.
will dutifully run for elected office.
That's right. Whether we're hiring or whether they're running for office, we need to have good people. I like to think that we get good people, but we also need people who are, I think, engaged and
Talented
smart.
and engaged.
Yes.
That's true. Well, thank you for joining
you.
us this evening. I hope you've learned a few things about this position. It's a big decision, and I think we'll be able to make the right one. You've heard the opinions tonight and the opinions of both sides. And I want to say that I hope you join us for our 100th show, our 100th anniversary show, coming up on the 16th. And hopefully we'll see you there.
And in the interim, go to the polls on Saturday for those of you in town. Thank you and good night.